Hi, this is Eric from Longbox Review at longboxreview.wordpress.com. Welcome to episode 19, the previews episode for the March catalog for things shipping in May and beyond. First up is Dark Horse, and we have a new Darth Vader series coming out from Dark Horse, which I'm sure a lot of people will find interesting. And as I said in the last previews episode, which was not available in the usual feed for the podcast, I released it as a standalone episode on the website only. But I did talk about Resident Alien number 0, and this month they're soliciting number 1. It's a miniseries, but it does not say how many issues, which that really irritates me. I wish the publishers would tell you how many issues these things are. I wanted to order this, the Guild Fox one-shot, but I had to cut it because of the total price of my comic order. But this is written by Felicia Day and Will Wheaton, and of course delving into the Fox character, which if you're a fan of the Guild as I am, the Will Wheaton Fox character is pretty damn funny in the show. So I thought I'd get this, but it was the casualty of my pocketbook. Also, last time for the February previews episode, I talked about a Matt Kindt one-shot that I ordered. And here we have this month, Mind Management from Matt Kindt. I'm probably going to regret not ordering this, but it looks interesting based on the description. And as the Dark Horse solicitation copy reads, brain-melting sci-fi. The Phil Noto cover to Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 9, Number 9 looks pretty cool. It's a split cover featuring Buffy looking at each other. Two Buffys looking at each other on the cover. One is in a restaurant with looks like zombies in the background, and the other is she looks like a high society lady, and they're just staring at each other. Looks really nice. Phil Noto's been doing a good job on that. The ad copy here is Slayer versus Slayer versus Slayer, whatever that means. So I'm sure that'll be a pretty interesting issue. And boy, speaking of covers, the Freaks of the Heartland hardcover by Steve Niles and Greg Ruth, that just looks cool. Just based on that cover alone, I want to read that comic. All right, that's it for Dark Horse. Now on to DC. The very first page, they talk about the next wave, the second wave of DC Comics, the New 52, spotlighting Earth 2, World's Finest, Dial H, GA Combat, and the Ravagers, all new number ones. Oh, and Batman Incorporated, all new number ones. So on the last episode of Longbox Review, Travis and I talked about Earth 2 and World's Finest, and I talked about how excited I am about these two titles and the examination of this New 52 Earth 2, and that has not diminished. I cannot wait to read these comics and see what they're going to do with that. Getting Batman Incorporated is a no-brainer for me, just because I started off with the first volume of that series and loved it. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Grant Morrison and company take that concept and incorporate it into the New 52 Batman universe. The preview image to Action Comics number 9 looks pretty cool with the alternate world Superman. In fact, the ad copy here states featuring characters from parallel Earths, including President Superman. Our guest artist Gene Ha joins Grant Morrison for this tale of not one, not two, but 3 Earths, so that should be pretty cool. I always like the alternate Earth stories, especially when it comes to Superman, and Grant Morrison is just the guy to write that kind of stuff. Also this month from DC is the Culling crossover between Superboy, the Teen Titans, and Legion Lost. Starts with the Teen Titans Annual number 1, then goes into Superboy number 9, and goes into Legion Lost number 9. So I'll be getting all those. Although, now that I mentioned it, Teen Titans Annual number 1, yet we're at issue number 9. How can it be an annual if we haven't had at least 12 issues? Speaking of annuals, one that caught my eye, Batman Annual number 1 by Scott Snyder and Jay Fabok. Mr. Freeze is introduced into the New 52. Unfortunately, it's all part of that Night of Owls. On the blog, I was writing about how I like crossovers. Specifically, I think I was talking about the Daredevil and Spider-Man crossover. And I think I mentioned on the podcast with Travis as well when we were discussing the Daredevil, Punisher, and I think it's Spider-Man crossover that's coming up soon from Marvel. But this whole Night of the Owls thing, where it touches all of the Batman universe comics, I'm kind of annoyed by that. I've enjoyed the Owl storyline in the Batman title by Scott Snyder and the artist Greg Capullo. And not that it's not a worthy story idea to take across the titles, it's just that every Bat title is touched by this, including this annual. It just seems like too much all at once, but I guess we'll see. It might turn out to be a really awesome story, and I'll eat my words. Hold on, I'm wrong about that. It's not all of the Bat titles, it's just nearly all of them. Justice League Dark number 9 is the debut of the new series writer Jeff Lemire, who introduces a new team roster and a new mission. It says, featuring John Constantine, Zatanna, Deadman, Black Orchid, and more. I really like the idea of Black Orchid being in this. That's one character that I was introduced to in the late 70s, early 80s, as I recall, and was intrigued by the character. And then we get the reimagining by Neil Gaiman in the Black Orchid miniseries that came out. So I'm really curious to see what the new Black Orchid is going to be like. I am pleased to see that Zatanna is still in JL Dark. We'll see how the rest of the team fits in with that. Another annual that I'm interested in is the Animal Man annual, even though I dropped Animal Man after number 6, and I know a lot of people are calling me crazy for doing so. But I am interested, however, in reading this, as the copy reads, a standalone tale detailing the history of the epic struggle between the Red, the Green, and the Rot. So that'd be a nice background story, I think. So I'll be getting that. Speaking of crossovers, here's one between two different titles, Resurrection Man and Suicide Squad. So I'll be getting, again, like Animal Man, I dropped Resurrection Man after number 6. That was a hard decision on my part, because I actually did enjoy that series, but it wasn't quite grabbing me enough to keep me stuck with it. So, but I'll get this standalone issue to get the whole story with that crossover. Here we go. Finally, after, I don't know, it's been a few years now, at least, the Batman Earth 1 hardcover by Jeff Johns and Gary Frank. When the Earth 1 series was first introduced and they released the Superman Earth 1, which I reviewed in, I believe, episode 4 of the Long Box Review podcast, so go check that out. I'll probably be doing the same thing for this Batman Earth 1 story. I always like the reimaginings of the early days of these superheroes' lives, so I'm looking forward to that story. Although anybody who's read my blog for a long time or listened to the podcast knows that I'm not a big fan of Gary Franks. I think he's quite an accomplished artist. I just don't care for his style, especially the way he draws mouths. But the preview image here looks pretty good, so I can tough it out for this story. Next to that, this is on page 121, Smallville Season 11, Number 1. Now, Smallville is a show that I stopped watching after the second or third season. I just couldn't handle the show any longer and the melodramatic stories and soap opera-esque quality of the show. However, I am getting this for two reasons. One, it's written by Brian Q. Miller, who in my mind, after reading his Batgirl series, can do no wrong, so we'll see how that goes with this. And Pere Perez is doing the art, and Mr. Perez was involved in the Batgirl series as well. He's one of my favorite artists from that run, so I'll be getting this for those two creators. As far as the collections or trades from DC, here's one that I seriously considered getting, but I think I'll wait on that one. order it some other time. But the First Wave trade paperback collects First Wave 1 through 6 and the Batman Doc Savage #1 issue for $25. I remember when I first saw the solicitation for this and them bringing Batman into that universe, that pocket universe, if you will. I was kind of thinking, what the heck? What are they trying to do here? And then it seemed to be like this big splash at first, but then it just kind of petered out. And I remember thinking, well, where's the First Wave stuff? And it had come and gone really quickly. But I'm still interested in the story, so like I said, I'll have to check that out at some point. In the DC Comics Kids line, we have the first issue of Superman Family Adventures by Art Baltazar and Franco. So this is the title that replaced Tiny Titans, and there was a huge uproar on the internet about DC canceling Tiny Titans. But then it was followed up quickly by the announcement for this title. I'm actually going to start getting this title and see how it goes. I'll probably end up reading it to my granddaughters. Also, I'm going to start picking this up, Young Justice with number 16. It's something that I wish I had started picking up back when it was a new title, but I didn't for whatever. Well, I didn't because I generally don't pick up media tie-in comics, even to shows I particularly like, even though I collect Buffy and Angel and Faith. But those are kind of exceptions to me. But anyway, I really like the Young Justice animated series. It's one of my favorite shows on TV, period, not just cartoon. So I'm going to pick this up because it's the first part of a new storyline. It also guest stars Batman, Flash, and Green Arrow. So I think I'll enjoy that. We'll see. And I'm glad to see the return to DC of these $8 one-shots. They fluctuate between 80 and 100 pages. This one, Mystery in Space #1, is 80 pages. I'm going to be getting that. All right, next up is IDW, which has a real big item here that I'm really looking forward to with, I have to admit, a little bit of trepidation. I'll explain that in a second. But they're putting out a Star Trek The Next Generation Doctor Who crossover miniseries. It's called Assimilation Squared. Let's see, this is written by Scott and David Tipton with Tony Lee and J.K. Woodward doing the art. So that should be pretty good. Features the Borg and the Cybermen as the villains, so we'll see how that goes. Like I said, I'm looking forward to this, but I have a little bit of concern about it because the Star Trek and Legion of Superheroes crossover that IDW is publishing hasn't really delivered on the expectation I had for that series. I hope this crossover is better in my mind than the current Star Trek Legion of Superheroes one. And I had to really think about this next one. This is on page 155, Trio by John Byrne. So this is his return to doing a superhero series. This is featuring characters, as they call themselves, 1, 2, and 3, but the world, as it says here in the solicitation copy, the world calls them Rock, Paper, and Scissors. And together they are the Trio. I was really interested in at least checking out the first few issues probably. But again, this is another casualty of limited funds. But I always enjoyed John Byrne's work. I collected his Alpha Flight back in the 80s, and I really enjoyed that. And I've read various things over the years of his. Most notably, the Superman Batman Generation series that he did for DC. I really enjoyed those. The preview art on this for Trio looks pretty good. It's John Byrne doing his thing. But like I said, I couldn't take that one on too. Here's something I'd be interested in looking at. I don't know that I'd need to buy it, but it's the Dave Mazzucchelli's Daredevil Born Again Artist Edition. I really regret, I think I mentioned this on the last previous episode, I really regret not getting the John Romita Artist Edition. I hope to be able to pick that up somewhere. But I'd really like to see this because that Born Again storyline written by Frank Miller was one of my absolute favorite comic stories of all time, not to mention probably one of the best Daredevil stories ever, and in no small part, of course, to David Mazzucchelli's art on that series. This caught my eye too, page 168, Comic Book History of Comics by Fred Van Lente and Ryan Dunleavy. So on the cover here, a cover image, it says, "The inspiring, infuriating, and utterly insane story of the American comic book industry." I'd really like to read that. And here's another oddball book, Doug Wildley's Rio, The Complete Saga. So for $50 you get the complete Cowboy series. And not that I'm a big fan of Westerns in the first place, but that cover image and just my desire to read things other than superhero stories lately, especially lately, that really caught my eye. Next up is Image, and the first title in this section is a new series called Mind the Gap by Jim McCann, who's the writer, and Roden Esquejo and Sonia Obuck doing this. Mr. Esquejo does the covers to Morning Glories, and his interior art, at least for this first issue, looks pretty darn good, just like his cover work. So I'm going to pick that up and check it out. There's a lot of new #1 stuff coming out from Image. Dancer, Epic Kill, Youngblood returns. It's not really an issue 1, but is the return of the series. The Grim Leaper miniseries. And again, while not a #1, technically, we have the relaunch of Supreme, #64. So last month, Image solicited Supreme #63, which was the final Alan Moore script for the series that they finally put out. And apparently that was a preface to what they're doing now, which is relaunching Supreme, but with Eric Larson doing the story and art. And while I ordered Supreme #63 to read that final Alan Moore tale, after having read the Checker Books editions of Supreme and really enjoying those, so I wanted to see that final tale, I won't be picking up #64. Next up is Marvel. And the very first thing that caught my eye for Marvel was Secret Avengers #27, where, yes, it's an Avengers versus X-Men tie-in, yeah. But what happens here is that Captain Marvel is reborn to unite all Kree. Captain Marvel has always been one of my very favorite Marvel characters. And so I'm really curious to see what Marvel's going to do with the Captain Marvel reborn thing. Is this the Captain Marvel that we used to know, or is this a new guy? What is it? He has the same looking costume as the original Captain Marvel, although colored differently. So we'll see how that goes. I may have to start reading Secret Avengers there if it's going to feature Captain Marvel. This is an interesting concept, I guess. The Hulk Smash Avengers miniseries. There are 5 issues of this, with each part of the 5 parts being a different era of Hulk versus the Avengers. So the first one is Hulk versus the 60s era Avengers, and then the 70s, and then the 80s, and then the 90s, etc. So while I'm not going to read this, I find it interesting that they're doing this, although I question why they're doing it, why they're releasing one each week. That seems like an awful lot for people to take in, especially since, well, no, these are just $2.99, but still, that's $15 of comics right there. Wow, that cover to Daredevil #12 is quite visually striking, and that's all I'll say on that. Although I see that Marvel is double shipping Daredevil in May. I really don't like that they do that. But I keep buying it, so they're going to, me and everybody else, so they're going to keep doing it. Garth Ennis returns to Marvel under the Fury Max series, with issues 1 and 2 shipping in May. I like the cover images, or at least the preview images here, look really cool. Oh, and look at this. Page 63 of the Marvel previews. Takio #1. So they did the graphic novel. It says, bursting from the pages of last year's best-selling graphic novel comes this all-new, all-ages superhero adventure. I read the Takio. I meant to do a review of that, never got around to it, but it was enjoyable, especially for an all-ages book. But now they're apparently doing a a new comic book series based on that. So, which is interesting because if I remember correctly, Bendis was talking about doing a series of graphic novels under the Takio banner, but now they're doing a series. So that's interesting, an interesting change. And finally, from Marvel, I see that they're releasing a Civil War prose novel based on that series. It's written by Stuart Moore. That's interesting. I wonder why Marvel's doing that, other than, to put their product in bookstores more, and I guess in some way. On to the smaller publishers. Saw a lot of good things here. I'll probably just go through this real quick. First of all, Rachel Rising, number 8, be the second issue I have pre-ordered. I'm really looking forward to reading that. I'm going to get the trade. I ordered number 7, and now I'm going to get 8, so can't wait to read that. The Lost Girl graphic novel from Arcana Studio, just based on that description, that seems kind of interesting. It's about werewolves and forbidden love, so that's kind of neat. Here's one from Big Dog Inc., Ursa Minor. I'll just read the text here. Nature's supernatural balance is shattered when... I didn't realize this until I just read it, but here's another werewolves. When werewolves assassinate the president and the vampires come to mankind's aid. Now, one girl with a power she can barely control sets out to right what has gone horribly wrong, the only way she knows how. Kill them all. I liked it up until that last part, so... let me go back one second. Azure Press has a book called Storm Rider, which... This is number 2. I missed it last time, but this features the character of Thor, not the Thor that we all know from Marvel Comics, of course. But I'm always intrigued by how different publishers treat the Thor character. When Neil Gaiman did his version of Thor in Sandman, I thought that was just a revelation. We've lived so long with Thor from Marvel Comics and that interpretation of the character that's kind of indelibly marked in our brains about what Thor should look like and how he should act and talk and all that stuff. So it was really refreshing to see Neil Gaiman's take on this big dumb oaf character in that one Sandman issue. I think that was the Season of Mists storyline. I'm probably wrong about that, so don't quote me on that. But I see that cover image. I'm like, is that Thor? And I read the solicitation title, and yes, indeed, there's Thor. So curious about that. Boom Studios, the final issues of both Incorruptible and Irredeemable. So that's Incorruptible is ending with issue number 30, Irredeemable number 37. Now I kind of regret not getting the later issues of these titles. I dropped Irredeemable at 25. Incorruptible, I think I dropped at 12. But I did pick up the crossover. I think it was a 3-part crossover just recently, and enjoyed that. So maybe I'll have to go back and pick up these issues at some point if I can find them cheap, especially. Also from Boom is the title Higher Earth. They're coming out with the first issue with a special $1 price. This is written by Sam Humphries. That's interesting. It gives a lot of the artists for the cover art, but it doesn't say who's actually drawing the interior of the book, as far as I can tell. But nice cover art. You got Joe Benitez doing one, Phil Noto, Ben Oliver, and what caught my eye initially was the Fraser Irving cover. So another sci-fi story whose premise is really interesting. It says here, you are illegal on this Earth. Space is dead. Why conquer other planets when there's a perfectly good Earth in the universe next door? This I found really interesting in the timing, especially. So Dynamite last month solicited the new Shadow series, number 1. This month they're doing a very similar thing in the classic character, the Spider, number 1. By the way, more great covers from Alex Ross, John Cassaday, and others. but I find it really interesting that the same publisher would come out with two titles with somewhat the same characters. I mean, if you look at them, they're both pulp characters who go around shooting people, and they both wear hats. And that's really all I know of the Spider. But I mean, visually, if you look at this, they look very, very similar. The new Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide, Volume 42, is being solicited. I got the previous volume last year, and I intended to go through my entire comic collection and price everything according to the Overstreet Comic Book Price Guide. And now here's the updated version, and I haven't even started my project. Oni Press has Xoc, I think that's how you spell or say it. It's XOC, The Journey of a Great White. This title explores the ocean's wonders through the eyes of a great white shark as it treks from the Farallon Islands off the coast of California to the warm waters of Hawaii. That's one of the nice things about comics. You can pretty much do anything you like, but I'm really curious as to how good this really would be. If anybody reads that, I'd really like to know what you thought of it. Here's a new graphic novel by Eddie Campbell called The Lovely Horrible Stuff. This is put out by Top Shelf. Of course, this caught my eye because of Eddie Campbell's work on From Hell with Alan Moore. And plus the book cover image is basically a riff on U.S. currency here. So I'm really curious as to what this is. The ad copy reads, his latest book is a dizzying autobiographical investigation into money. It's a voyage that takes him all the way from the imaginary wealth of Ponzi schemes to the real hard stuff on an obscure South Sea tropical island where he investigates the history of the stone money. Some really interesting things coming out from the small press publishers. And if I had more money, I would get more of these things. You probably heard this in the news. Valiant Comics is returning, and this is their first foray of their return, Exo Man of War #1. I found it funny, the two-page spread talking about the Valiant returns here in previews. They have this bulleted list talking about how many comics they sold, how many video games they sold based on Valiant characters. Here we go. Named Diamond's New Publisher of the Year in 1992 and Diamond's Publisher of the Year in 1993. If I were, I don't know, I guess, something old returning to be new again, so to speak. I guess that's news, but to tout something that is so old, 1992 and 1993, as a selling point, doesn't impress me any. Here's something else curious. For the figurine collection magazines from Marvel and DC, usually I see 2 characters being solicited in previews, but this month for both, as I said, Marvel and DC, there are 3 characters. So what's up with that? One of DC's characters is the new Aqualad that was introduced in Brightest Day, whom we have not seen in the New 52, which is kind of too bad because I like that character. Of course, that's the character that the Aqualad in the animated series is based on, or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe they, DC knew, maybe the whole animated series thing was in production well before Brightest Day, and they introduced that character into the comics as a way of introducing the new Aqualad from the animated series. I don't know, to get some cohesiveness, I guess, for the character between the two media. But anyway, in other words, I'd like to see that character return in the New 52 at some point. If you didn't know, Neil Gaiman's American Gods novel is coming out with a 10th anniversary edition. 10 years! I can't believe it's been that long since I've read that book. And that was a great book. If you haven't read American Gods and you're a fan of Neil Gaiman, I don't know what's stopping you, what kept you, but here's your chance to read the 10th anniversary edition. This also contains newly updated and expanded material with the author's preferred text. So I tend not to rebuy books. Like if I buy a hardcover book and then the softcover comes out with additional material, I tend not to want to rebuy that, even though I feel I've been cheated. I mean, I spent extra money on that damn hardcover, so I should be getting everything, not having to pay, even though it's a lesser price, having to pay again to get that extra material. So I won't be picking that up, but if you haven't read American Gods, you really should. You should go pick this copy up. I'm looking at the Amazing Spider-Man movie resin statue. This is on page 378. Does anybody else think that that new Spider-Man movie costume looks really bad? I'm sure it'll look better on screen than it does in this statue or in this image of the statue, but it just does not look good. Why do the movie people feel they have to mess with the costumes? It's like the Superman Returns costume. I hated that. I didn't like what they did with that. I'm not too keen on the images I'm seeing for the new Superman movie either. I mentioned Captain Marvel's return in Secret Avengers earlier. Here we have a Captain Marvel statue. This is on page 398 for $225. It's not a particularly good statue, but at least from this image. And on the same page here, 402, you have not one, not two, but four Star Trek Starship model kits. One is one of the Enterprise that comes in a lunchbox, which that's kind of cool. And then you have a two-piece model kit featuring the Klingon bird of prey and a Ferengi ship. And then you have a 1/537th scale model of the USS Reliant, which looks pretty cool. And finally, man, I really want this. I want to get this model and put it together and put it on the mantle somewhere in my office. But it's the USS Enterprise 1701A. And for the fans of Doctor Who, if you ever thought that you needed a sonic screwdriver that actually was a screwdriver, well, now you can have one for $40. And there you go. That's a look at the previous catalog for things shipping in May and beyond. At least those things that caught my eye, captured my interest, and now you know what those are. Please let me know what you thought of these things, or let me know what you're considering buying from the previous catalog. You can email me at longboxreview@gmail.com. You can follow me on Twitter at longboxreview. I'm also on Facebook. And don't forget to visit the blog and leave some messages about the episode or anything else that happens to be posted there. Go to longboxreview.wordpress.com. Thanks for listening.